My name is Mike. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Mike.
I've already been bribed. 2 cents. That's not going to take you very far, John, I don't think. This is my second time in Alcoholics Anonymous. Oh, okay, my current sobriety date is 20 January 07. My first sobriety was February something or other, 1990. And I got sober then because I was pretty sure I was going to get a divorce. And that would have been my third divorce. And it would have been 3 children between 2 mothers. So there's 2 separate child support plans. I was seeing some really negative numbers there. And now that sounds pretty cold and calculated. Maybe I should back up a little bit. I love this woman. Today she's one of my best friends. So God works in mysterious ways. But that's the reason I came in. And South End, the Burien area, easy does it, a new beginning, pass it on. Those were the 3 halls that I kind of rotated at. I was doing really well. My career I was the retail manager for Safeway stores. And I had a lot of shit, you know. And of course I was soon to be paying all that out to my 2 ex-wives, but I think that was a problem, actually. Anyway, we ended up getting divorced, and but I stayed sober. I did the steps. I had a sponsee, but again, I was still infatuated with her. So I moved to Wenatchee on a career move because I thought she might follow me, and she did, actually, off and on. But we never could get back together. It was just, you know. That's a story for another day. I'm terrible at intimate relationships. I've just never been able to do it. So I finally moved back to the Seattle area around 1996. And in 1995, that's when I started drinking again. And the reason being is a little bit what I said. I was still a retail manager. I still had a lot of stuff. I was making a good income. And I just thought, well, why should I go to meetings, you know? And so I stopped. And about 6 months later at the store after work, grabbed a couple 6-packs, went home, and I drank them. And it wasn't an immediate destruction of my life at that time. It was slower. But about 6 months later, things were starting to deteriorate. You know, I didn't get along very good with my crew, and ever since I was a kid, I've been very suspicious of everyone. You know, I always thought you guys were out to get me, and you know, I don't know where that came from. I suppose a therapist could help, but I never did very well with them either. But be that as it may, I started drinking more. And I wanted to get back to Seattle. Eventually I did. I got transferred. I went to this one store, and the crew and I did not get along. Probably had something to do with my attitude. But so my drinking became heavier. I decided that I was going to leave Safeway. Okay. And I've been with them since I was a kid, 16 years old, right? I did 4 years in the Army, but I came right back into Safeway. So that's all I knew. But they were, again, like I said, I was paranoid. I don't know how else to describe it. And I was drinking more. So I went into my own business, and that allowed me to drink a whole bunch. And I left Safeway with a lot of money, but I spent it, okay? I spent a lot of it because I wasn't really doing very well in my own business. So, and drinking escalated, and it kept getting worse and worse. What happened, I finally got to a point, this was 06, 53, living with my mother, okay? I can tell you how good I was doing, right? And I went to Big Five Sporting Goods, got a job there, and met a young lady, and she was just like me. She was more into drugs, but she had an addictive personality and was struggling mightily. Um, I went back to Safeway. They asked them if I could get my job back, and they said, okay. I came back as a clerk, and I had a moment of clarity. Talks about that in the book, and I believe very strongly in that. I thought, you know what? I've got an opportunity here to maybe start having an income, maybe get my own place, maybe leave my mother alone, maybe get some self-respect back. Um, and it was, I believe it was a Sunday night, and she called and said, Mike, should we go out? Let's go to Rudy's. It was a little bar and grill at Burien area. And we went there and did what we always did. We drank and shot some pool and talked some stuff. And she said, I'm not gonna drink or use tomorrow. I said, what? And she said, yeah. She says, I'm gonna try and get into the drug treatment program. They had one in Burien on First Avenue. I think it was Sunrise is what it was. And I said, we continued to drink, but the next morning I didn't drink. And as far as I can remember, that was the 20th of January, okay? 2 days later, I called her and I says, hey man, you wanna go to a meeting? And she said, yes. We went to Airport Early Birds in Dave's Diner out by the airport, 6:30 a.m. And I really couldn't say anything for a couple of weeks. It was, I felt bad drinking, but honestly, first couple of months of sobriety, I felt like hammered horseshit. I was so riddled with anxiety. Thank God for the coffee maker position, at Pass It On and at Dave's, because all I would do is I'd make one pot of coffee, go around and fill it up, and then go make another pot of coffee and go around and fill it up. And I was able to meet people, but the biggest thing was I could move. I was batshit crazy, man. And the reality of what I had done with my life, I have adult children now, and they suffered. They suffered because of my drinking. So we stayed there for a while. I finally Pass It On became my home group, and that's where I started to look for a sponsor. And I had 3 sponsors in 6 months, and I don't recommend that. It was just something that, like I said, I wasn't all there. But each man took his time, tried to help me as best it could. And I actually did 3, 4th, and 5th steps. So it was the third guy, Carl. He was tough. And he looked me right in the eye and he says, are you going to tell me the truth? And then he reached over and grabbed my hand and held on to it and he wouldn't let go. I'm going, fuck, okay. And I says, yeah, I'm going to tell you the truth. He said, okay. And so we moved through. It took a while. To get through it. I didn't want to get in front of my family. I don't know about you, but people I hurt the most was my family, the people that I loved. And so we did it. And, I was at, not to crosstalk here, but I was at Neil's meeting yesterday evening. And I want to put a plug in for him because it's a step meeting. We talk about the steps. And I'm a big fan of the work, man. The work saved my life. And how when you talk about things in a meeting, things come back to you. And well, that 8th step came up, and this guy role played with me. I would sit across from the table. He would be my oldest daughter, and we would go through what I was going to say. That's to tell you how terrified I was of getting in front of those kids. And it worked. And he kept hammering home the idea, He says, Mike, he says, you're not in there alone, okay? Number one is you're with somebody, because this is my family, was the first block that I needed to get done. He says, not only are you in there with somebody that you really care about, yes, you hurt them, but you're trying to make it better. But, I'm just a phone call away. I'll talk to you before, I'll talk to you after. And he says, and God is with you. Okay. Now, I hadn't made that connection yet with God. I don't know if you guys struggled with that, but I don't think struggle is the right word. I always believed in God, but I had no faith. I didn't think God wanted anything to do with me. Well, that time going through with Carl in the step process cemented the fact that God does love me. And when I finished that 5th step with Carl, what had happened was it really felt like all the bad stuff had just been ejected from my body. And I could now start to fill it in with the good stuff. And so perfect timing, right? I mean, the steps are set up 1 through 12 for a reason. And I was able to go and get to that point to where I could get in front of those that I cared about and try and rectify the past. Not all of them gave me the sign of the cross and said, it's okay, Dad. My 2 youngest did. They were in their teens, so it was kind of tough. I debated, should I do this? Are they too young? What do I say? And again, that role playing and talking with Carl really helped. But they both told me, they said, Dad, we just want you in our life. We're happy that you're not drinking anymore, and we just want the best for you. I said, no, that's great. The oldest daughter was a different story. She went through many years of me drinking, and I was never really there as her father. We had separated from her mother pretty much from the beginning, so there was a lot with her that she was struggling with. And it was about 5 years ago, actually, we had a phone conversation. She lives in Texas now. And she told me what it was, that she felt abandoned. She felt that I cared more about my two youngest than I did about her. And it's hard to hear that, but I think it was harder for her to say that. But since then, we've been able to, we have conversations, and I feel like we have a relationship now. But man, it's, none of this would have happened without this format right here. The thing that got me going into the step work was the people, you guys. You see, when I got here, like I said, I had a tough time sitting down, staying still. Listening was hard, but boy, I'd hear people talk, and sometimes it would ring through, and I'd say, man, that guy's talking about something that I'm going through right now. But the thing is he was talking about it in the past tense. He had already been through it. Many years before, he had been through it, he had rectified what had happened, and he had moved on, and he had made that relationship with that person that he had hurt. And not
I'm sorry.
And that's what I wanted. That's why I came back. I wanted to get out. Well, I was in a huge financial hole, but I wanted to be a good guy, man. I wanted to be a good dad. I wanted to be a good son to my mother. My dad had been gone for a while. I wanted to be a good sibling. And even when I was drinking, I would say that I tried, but my self-centeredness always took precedent. If push came to shove, I was going to drink. I mean, That's number one. And I could be sitting across from you, but not really paying attention. You know, absent without leave. That's what we used to call us in the Army. And that's almost worse than physical abuse, I think. But it's this process, the meeting is so important. The pandemic, it hurt me because I wasn't connecting with the Zoom calls and that. I appreciated them being there, but the one-on-one, you know, the meeting before the meeting after the meeting, man, that's invaluable to me. That's where I get to hear you and maybe give a little bit of encouragement, some experience, strength, and hope. You see, I never did any of that when I was in an AA, when I was drinking. I never said anything. You know, I didn't talk about my problems. My parents grew up in the Depression. They got married in 1932. They never had shit. Okay, they were quarantined in Rainier Vista for tuberculosis. They spent 3 years there, quarantined. They had a tough life, man. And the last thing they wanted to fucking hear was my feelings, you know. And, you know, God bless them, man. They tried their best. So that's the way it was. And, you know, if I had a problem, take care of it. You know, I was running with some kids. I grew up I was born and raised here. I grew up in the White Center area. And there's a group that used to hang out down by Hicks Lake, and they were the local hoods, right? And so I wanted to run with them. I was excited. I'll never forget my dad. That was 8th grade, maybe. Took me out in the backyard. He says, "Son," he says, he never said much, you know. So this kind of had an impact. He says, "You know, you can run with those kids, but you ain't living here." And he turned around and walked back in. And I thought, holy shit, okay. So I had a decision to make. And that's the way he dealt with things. Now it worked. I started getting back into sports and doing stuff like that, so I didn't go that route. But, you know, my parents they were old school all the way. And my mother finally, at the end, she saw the value of Alcoholics Anonymous, and she also saw the value of me being able to talk about the shit that was kicking my ass. And we were able to talk about things. And it was a big deal for me to be able to take care of her at the last year of her life. She was terminal with cancer. And my son and I, actually. And we lived in her house and took care of her, and it was pretty awesome. But again, if I was drinking, maybe I would have tried to do it, but it wouldn't have been anything like what it was. So the biggest benefit, I believe, with Alcoholics Anonymous and being sober is, as I read it, it's addressed in, I believe it's chapter 4, We Agnostics. And it says the purpose of this book is to find a power greater than me that will solve the problem. It doesn't say help me with the problem. It doesn't say guide me along with the problem. It says solve the problem. And like I said, it took years for me to connect with God. But that was always in the back of my mind. And I had heard that from you guys. The ones that did what and acted, especially outside the room, when they acted with kindness and love to others, I thought, wow, you know, because I hadn't done that in my life. And I wanted to do that. I wanted to not react to people in a negative way, even if they were reacting that way to me. And it's a real challenge. But I saw it in here. And we talked about it. And we practiced it. And I prayed on it. And I pray on it today. It's life in sobriety, it's a good life. It's something that I really never knew existed. My first sobriety was okay. I mean, it is what it is, that's where I was. But that 12 years in between, that's the one that dropped me to the curb. And it just, when I got here, I felt like, maybe I got a second chance. Where is it? But for the grace of God, there go I. And I had to look that word up, grace. It's an undeserved gift from God. And that's the only explanation I can give you for those couple days when my friend and I decided not to drink. And then we made that decision to go to an AA meeting. And we both marched on, trudged that happy road to destiny. There's most of you I recognize in here. He's asleep now, so. Hey, you little fucker. You gave me 2 cents. That's all right, I love you, buddy, because I'm a little fucker too. Well, we're not a glum lot here, as you can see. That's what I mean, John and I have had many conversations after the meeting, and I appreciate him opening up his life for me to see, because there's some correlations there, man. The kids are the toughest. At least they were for me. My mother, she was hard, to make amends and to move through it and to come out the other side of it. But my children, that's where I really held a lot of guilt and remorse. But today, right now, I don't feel that. I don't feel guilt and remorse. And that first wife, I just got over my resentment to her. 40 years, and I did the steps. I even got in front of her for the amends. 40 freaking years, man. Can you imagine that? And it just this year, it's kind of like, I'll tell you what it's like. You remember that day when you woke up in your first year or two of sobriety and you thought, Jesus Christ, I haven't thought about drinking. Well, I did that this year. I said, man, I have not had a negative thought about Diane. I can't remember the last time. And, but for the grace of God, right? And that's the only explanation I can give you. God has been and still is, and as long as I keep working on it, will continue to be my guiding force. And no matter what's going on, and I've been through some shit in sobriety, as I know you guys have too. But man, all I got to do is, as Bill says in chapter 1, all I got to do is pause, take that quiet moment, and ask for help. And to me, all that is I say the Lord's Prayer. I say it out loud. Normally I'm in the car. And then I just listen for a minute. And it just brings me back down to reality, man, every single time. My hair gets on fire regularly. And because I'm not all there sometimes. But man, that thing has got a lot of power in my life. So how are we doing here? 5 minutes? Well, I'm talking about myself, so I can't go on and on and on and on. I just got a call from a guy that I knew when I first came back at Pass It On, and we went through the steps together. He felt the need to go out and experiment again, but he called me back, and I just love this guy. he's just one of those. He's like soda, man. I mean, how can you not love that guy? And it was such a joy to hear his voice. And he said, Mike, he says, my old girlfriend actually told him, said, hey, he had been started coming back to meetings out in the South End. And he said, well, why don't you give Mike a call? And he says, okay, so we did. And we're going to, set up in a couple of weeks, and hopefully we can walk through that process again. It's been a while since I walked somebody through the steps, but it's always a good thing, And there's many forms of service work, okay, many forms. Sponsoring, yes, it is. It's what we talk about. But man, I mean, sometimes you can sit and listen to someone for a couple of minutes, and that's all it takes, there's some folks in this room that have listened to me, and that's all it takes, man. There's something about saying it out loud, I say it out of my mouth, and it takes the power away. It takes that negative power away, and but for me anyway, I have to draw God into the picture. Because see, none of this would have happened without him. And if you would have known me before I got sober and listened to me talk about God and prayer and talking about my feelings and all that, you would just, because see, none of the guys I drank with, none of them are sober. There's one that he calls me regularly, and he's drunk, man, when he calls me. And it's hard to talk to a drunk that's been drinking. And I feel terrible for him. I love that guy. But all he really wants, he wants his old drinking buddy back, And, he's as old as I am, man. And he's all broken up in the face. And it's just, alcoholism towards the end can be really horrible. It can be, and I know you guys have seen it. Hopefully not somebody close, but man, that's just the physical part of it. The emotional part is what really brought me back. But if I had never come back the second time, the way I was drinking, I'm not sure I'd be around today. It's just because my body is it's fucked up, man. I mean, it's just harder to do shit, And then you guys don't know about that, though. It's just harder to move, harder to do that. I don't know how anybody lives on the street that's old. I don't understand it. And using and drinking. It's we have a lot of work to do. That's why I love Fremont. I love Fremont and I hate Fremont. I'm sorry, I had to put it that way, but when it was on 90th and Aurora, I mean, there's some people there that you are just magnificent. But man, I used to chair a meeting on Sundays at 3, and this one guy would come in about quarter after, and he'd walk up to the front desk and he'd go, "Fuck you," and then he'd turn around and walk out. And I mean, it was every Sunday, 3 o'clock. I'm going, okay. I guess I deserve that, But it was crazy there. And some would describe that 90th and Aurora as an oasis in hell. Because, man, oh man, those people, they're going through the shitstorm there. But what can you do?
Yeah.
We don't, as far as I can tell, we don't suffer from that at the one on 3rd and 85th. And again, plug for Neil's meeting, 6:30 to 7:30 on Friday. It's a great meeting. For this day, we're still doing that, right, at noon on Saturday. That's a great meeting too. And I think we have chair people all the way through for all the noons now. So that's in the Greenwood area, if you're not familiar with it, but come down. I'll give you 7 minutes and
You're on.
6 seconds. Okay, you want these back, John? You want your pennies back?